Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Bank failures are something we hear about from time to time, but not that often, actually. I mean, they make the news when they happen. And so there's been another bank failure here that hit the news, and Bill sent me a note about this. Kansas Heartland, a tri-state bank closed by the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And I know all about the FDIC, and of course, so do you if you have a bank account. It's always in a sticker on the window and on the door, and it says, deposits here are insured up to a certain amount by the FDIC. And that, of course, is done so that you have confidence in the banking system. They don't want people thinking, gee, if that bank fails, I'll lose all my money, just like that poor guy in that movie. And so CNN published a story by Rameshah Maroof, and it's actually a fairly short story, but Heartland Tri-State Bank of Elkhart, Kansas, failed on Friday with the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation taking control. The FDIC agreed to assume all the deposits of Heartland Tri-State Bank to protect customers, entering a purchase and assumption agreement with Dream First Bank of Syracuse. And by the way, I know a lot of attorneys. And a lot of attorneys out there have strange jobs. And so it wouldn't surprise you when I tell you that somebody is an attorney and does a certain kind of work. But I do know some people in some unusual situation. I do know some people in some unusual employment situations. And I actually know an attorney for the FDIC. And so if a bank fails, if they're doing everything right, they shouldn't have failed. And so quite often the FDIC will come in, oversee the transition and take care of all the depositors, and then they'll investigate to find out if anybody had done something that wasn't on the up and up, that caused that failure. And then the guy I know will often be involved in the litigation that follows when a bank fails for the wrong reasons. So the failure here means that 4 branches of Heartland Tri-State Bank will reopen as branches of Dream First Bank on Monday. Dream First. The recent closures of First Republic, Silicon Valley Bank, and Signature Bank this year have shaken up the banking industry, prompting lawmakers to introduce new legislation to protect customer deposits and stabilize the financial system. Heartland Tri-State Bank is the first bank to fall since First Republic, which was the nation's second largest bank failure ever in early May. Now, I don't remember hearing about that, but I did hear about the Silicon Valley Bank because that's a bank failure that appeared to be part of the tech situation over there on the West Coast. The FDIC said bank customers can access their money by writing checks or using ATM or debit cards. They also won't have to change their banking habits as they will automatically become customers of Dream First Bank. Heartland Tri-State Bank had approximately $139 million in total assets and $130 million in total deposits, the FDIC said. Dream First also agreed to buy essentially all of Heartland Tri-State's failed assets, essentially all. So the FDIC plays matchmaker. And they go, okay, here's a bank that's going under. Let's find a bank that wants to take over their business. So you approach another bank that's solvent and you go, do you guys want all of their deposits and all of their liabilities? And anybody who's figuring this stuff out will go, well, obviously not all of both, because then we're just getting stuck here with a losing proposition. So the FDIC will see to it that whatever gets pushed over to Dream First Bank makes sense. Loan customers should also be largely unaffected because the FDIC and Dream First Bank are entering an agreement to share in the losses and potential recoveries on those loans. So the loans have now been assigned to this bank. And by the way, I've had people ask me about that. If you take out a bank loan to buy a car, buy a house, if you read the contract you sign, it says right in there, almost always, that they have the right to assign that loan to somebody else. And if they do that, your obligation then goes from them to somebody else. And that's perfectly legal. You should continue to make payments, including escrow payments, as usual. The terms of your loan will not change. And of course, that's also part of the agreement, is that when they assign the loan to somebody else, it doesn't change other than who you're paying the money to. But I've gone through this before. I years ago had an account at a bank, and the only reason I had the account there is I started a new job. When I started the new job, I didn't have a bank account at the time, and so, at least not locally. So I found out where my employer banked, and when I got a paycheck, it was drawn on a local bank. So I went in there with my first paycheck and opened up an account there because I assumed that in the future, if I've got checks from my employer and they're made out to me, but they're written on this bank, if I deposit them into this bank, it's possible the transaction will go more smoothly. I was just thinking in the old days that maybe the money will clear faster, whatever. There's no question that these checks are good. Now, there was never any question that they'd be good otherwise because the employer was good. But my point simply is I thought that'd be easier. I just assumed there'd be some benefit to that. And I remember about 10, 12 months later, going into the bank one day to make a deposit, and there was some commotion going on, and it was clear that something was happening in it. I don't know what it was. And then I remember reading the papers within a day or two that there was trouble at this bank. Trouble at the bank. And then I remember going in one day, and there's all these new signs up. And the bank had changed. It was no longer this bank. It was now this bank. And I remember reading about it, and the FDIC had come in because the earlier bank had gotten into trouble financially, and they were about to go under. And they failed. They failed. And banks do fail. There's nothing crazy about banks failing. It's a question of how many of them fail and how much assets they've got and so on like that. But this bank failure happened seamlessly because it never interrupted my ability to bank there. It was the weirdest thing. And I remember at the time going, well, that actually is quite impressive. Because you know that the banks have got like all kinds of computer systems and networks and stuff. And even back then they would have had that stuff. Maybe not quite as complex as it is today. And I've seen what the tellers have to do at my bank when I go in and transact with them. And I've watched all the different screens they go through and stuff. And I'm assuming that if my bank ever gotten taken over like that, I suspect that there'd be some issues with that, but it happened seamlessly. So I mean, I even kept writing checks that still had my old banking information. I said, yeah, you just keep using this till you run out and you order some new ones from us. So the bank failure can happen seamlessly, which is a result of the FDIC. And by the way, the FDIC insurance cap has gone up over the years. So I remember it used to be $100,000, and then it went up to $250,000. And so the big question is, and this is something that most people don't ever have to stop and worry about, is if you had more than that in cash laying in the bank, do you lay awake at nights and go, what if my bank fails? Should I take that extra money out and put it in a different bank? What should I do? So, but this bank failure here, if it affects you, it won't affect you much. Just keep transacting business as usual, but somewhere down the road, your information is going to change on your bank account, so on. So bank failure, Kansas Heartland Tri-State Bank closed by the FDIC. Rameshwar Maroof wrote that for CNN, and Bill sent it. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. It'll probably work better if you plug it in.